Let's try to get these lineups set. Now, of course, I do want to update the rankings with just the few pieces of news that we've had come out since we last looked. A real quick, Tyler Boyd expected to play. Does it matter? No. Has zero impact on Calvin Ridley. And for the love of God, do not be rostering Tyler Boyd unless you're in a super deep dynasty league. Tony Pollard expected to play week 9. Again, I do want to reiterate, Pollard probably somebody that you want to be playing. I mean, right now, the Titans are about 3-point favorites in this game. You have no Tajee Spears, so Pollard should have the receiving usage. And if you were rostering Julius Chestnut for whatever reason, I mean, at this point, you can go ahead and you can let him go. Brian Robinson Jr. expected to play. Definitely nice. I mean, honestly, since he is cleared earlier, I'll move him back ahead of Hunt. I mean, the big thing is, of course, that you have seen the snap rate fall as Brian Robinson has dealt with this hamstring injury. Now, going over to Xavier Legette, he does plan on playing week 9. You also have no Adam Thielen either. So Legette, hopefully I get a big week for my best ball teams. I actually drafted a decent amount of him on Underdog. In your regular redraft league, honestly, I'd rather start him over Douglas. I'd rather start him over Wandale. I'd probably start him over Rome, Tolbert. McMillan is questionable with the hamstring as well. So honestly, this point, I think we move Yoshi Vosh behind him. I think we move Gabe Davis behind them. I think Legette's down here with like Sutton where it's okay. I mean, you can start him if you really need to, but probably would look to avoid if possible. But yeah, comparing him to like Jalen McMillan, who's questionable on a Monday night with a hamstring injury. If I had to choose between the two, I would just go ahead. I would just play Legette myself. Take Bigsby plans on playing in week 9. Now, I don't have any additional news with Travis Etienne just yet. Bigsby, well, I'll double check to see if we've had anything with Etienne. Bigsby's probably in the range of guys that I personally don't want to plan on. I would probably go with him over Bucky, just given the fact that Bucky is questionable for a Monday night game here. But really with Bigsby, if Etienne ends up playing, then he's going to be in a split backfield in a tough matchup against Philly where the Jags are heavy dogs. I'm seeing Tony Pollard going to play, and then we already talked about all this previously. So we can go ahead, we can submit the updated ranks, and we can go back over to what we have with the questions on the site. And this first question coming out from C. Peterson says, thank you, GOAT. No, thank you for being a member of the flock. My guy, going to be excited to check this out. This is just a simple start sit question where we need a wide receiver and a flex. Wide receiver, if you have Olave, for the love of God, make sure you are starting Olave this week. You actually have the Saints offense projecting out to be significantly better than what you are used to historically. Because this is a phenomenal matchup against the Carolina Panthers, you have a very high implied team total here with the Saints. No Shaquille as well. Olave should have a ridiculous amount of target volume. And then going over to the flex, I would love to get in Devonta Smith, but to be honest with you, assuming Zach Moss misses, I think you go ahead and I think you play Chase Brown. Chase Brown, you're looking at a running back that has the guaranteed full split of his backfields, while at the same time, you have a phenomenal matchup going up against the Raiders. So I think Brown is kind of an easy play at this point. Now, our next question coming out from Mont Baby, a massive dono here with the team review. Really appreciate you. Going to be excited to check this out. Let me hook you up with both a free trade question and a free start sit question as well, just in case you have anything else you want to follow up with this team. And let me remind everybody as well, if they wanted to get a free team review, you actually can over there on Underdog Fantasy, where if you go over to Underdog Fantasy with a link in the live chats, you're going to get a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. Whatever your fantasy football team, whatever you're playing on, you can send it in. And if you use code FLOCK on Underdog, you're also going to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. A free Jalen Hurts pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game tomorrow night. And if you wanted that free team review over on the site, just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way I'm able to go through, and that way I'm able to credit you with that free team review voucher. Because obviously I need to know who signed up and who didn't. But anyway, it says, please help me take down Team Reaver. He's a monster that needs to be stopped. I'm 8-0, and I need to improve before the trade deadline in week 9. Dear God, you got an early trade deadline, my friend. But yeah, looking at this, I mean, obviously, if you're 8-0, I will say the only real thing we are thinking about with your roster is how do we optimize specifically for the fantasy football playoffs? You're guaranteed a playoff spot. You're a very, very heavy favorite as well to get the bye. This is a 12-team league in which you can start up to 4 wide receivers weekly. So it is a league where the depth does matter here a considerable amount. Now, Waiver is the top dog in this league, according to the league analyzer. Now, at the same time, we're 8-0, so I'd probably rather be in our spots where we do this for number 14. We are actually down at 5th in the league analyzer, but we are 8-0. Reaver's 4-4, so, I mean, you are sitting here with kind of all the power. Starting off at quarterback, we are sitting with Josh Allen. So we have an elite quarterback we're able to play every single week. Obviously, you can make an argument to roster a second QB. When you have somebody like Jared Goff over there on the waiver wire, you have to play Allen. You have to play a different quarterback, obviously, in the week 12 bye for Josh Allen. But at the same time, you are trying to optimize for the fantasy football playoff upside. And obviously, we will be going through and we'll be rolling with Josh Allen for that. Now, I will say, if we were having to nitpick and figure out if we wanted to roster a backup tight end right now or a backup quarterback, I know that Kraft is closer to his bye week. I guess if you're a real big believer in Gesicki, thing is, you're not starting Gesicki this week. And this is the week that Gesicki would be more interesting, given the fact that you have no Higgins. So if Higgins comes back in week 10, then at that time, I probably would rather just start Hunter Henry there at tight end rather than Mike Gesicki. So, I mean, if you were going to roster the backup tight end right now, I think that I would prefer to go with Hunter Henry. Obviously, we are expecting that we are going to be getting Drake May good to go in week 10. Drake May should be good to go this week. Henry has balled with May under center. And Gesicki really has only been viable in games in which you've had no Higgins. So if you're looking at tight ends for this week, wouldn't it fault you at all for going Gesicki over Henry? But the thing is that we are looking at our team. We're not playing either over Tucker Kraft. We really just need to cover the week 10 bye next week. So I know it's a small adjustment, but I think I would drop Gesicki. I think I'd probably pick up Henry, or you can pick up Jared Goff as well, because obviously Goff, I mean, is a quarterback with a considerable amount of value and should be that clear bye week fill-in in week 12. And if you were to get that injury to Josh Allen, he could make our life a lot better. Now, going over to what we have at running back, we are sitting with Chase Brown. I probably need to move up Chase Brown in the rest of season rankings. Obviously, a lot comes down to how much time you're going to be seeing Zach Moss miss. But in any game in which you have no Zach Moss, I think that you could say that Chase Brown is potentially a low-end RB1 to a high-end RB2. Like, I think you can be extremely excited with Brown. Lock him in as a must-start player every single week. Running back is definitely the weak point of this team for sure. We have Ramondre Stevenson as our RB2. Jordan Mason has been viable up until this point, but obviously now that it seems like CMC may be coming back, while at the same time Jordan Mason's dealing with his own shoulder injury. I don't know how excited you are about Mason. Ray Davis, premium handcuff back. Who do you have on the waiver wire at running back? You have guys like Zeke, Dalvin. So I think you can leave Gibson here if you really wanted to. Obviously, if Zeke Elliott was getting cut or something, I would definitely say to cut Gibson and go get Dalvin. But if it's just a 1 week absence from Zeke and Dalvin's a washed running back in a spot where he's potentially at a 3-man running back by committee, then it doesn't matter as much. But if you were to go through and if you were to upgrade anything here, it's clearly going to be the running back position. Going over to wide receiver, you're looking at Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So we have 2 locked and loaded wide receiver ones already through their bye week. Chris Olave looks like he's going to be an extremely strong option here for the long term as well. This is a league in which you can start 4 wide receivers weekly. It's a 12-team format as well, so the depth matters a little bit more. So having somebody like Darnell Mooney here actually does make a difference for your team. And then Tillman, Elijah Moore, Chris Godwin at the very bottom. Obviously, if Godwin's not on the IR, if he's actually taking up an active roster spot, you cut Godwin immediately. You go ahead and you pick up a wide receiver like Gabe Davis instead. But I'm assuming that Godwin is not taking a rush spot. I'm assuming that he's on the IR. But I would still strongly consider cutting Elijah Moore. Now I understand, of course, Elijah Moore sees the 12 targets this past week in Cleveland, actually leads the Browns in targets. But still, at the same time, I mean, if we were projecting this out, I would still have Judy over him. I would have Tillman over him. I'd have David Njoku over him. So Elijah Moore showed promise as a rookie receiver. And honestly, I was really excited about him going into year 2. But since then, you've had absolutely nothing. You've had the team invest into the wide receiver position in any chance they had. I think Elijah Moore is like a good example of a player that could be viable in like best ball, where randomly he goes through and randomly he pops off. But in terms of your regular fantasy football redraft league, like to predict and get him into your starting lineup would be pretty much impossible. So for me, I'd rather just roster somebody like Dalvin instead of Elijah Moore if we try to think through the range of outcomes. If it was a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, I'd definitely say to pivot to Dalvin. Here, since it's a league in which you can start 4 wide receivers weekly, if you want to stay at the wide receiver position and go from Elijah Moore and instead get to Gabe Davis, I think you could look to do that as well post Christian Kirk injury. But then going through and trying to figure out where we should be after that. This is a team, like we said, we of course want to be going through and we want to be trying to make that upgrade at the running back position. The question is, how can you possibly do that? In my mind, the clear play is potentially going through and I don't know, pivoting over to a running back that's dealing with an injury now, but that gives you the long-term upside. So maybe looking at an option such as Christian McCaffrey here, I think could be very appealing. Let's go through and let's see if we can find a team that has a losing record that maybe has an injured guy or two that we can go after and try to acquire. This team's sitting at 2-6. They don't have anybody that's injured that we could possibly scoop at a discount. This team is 2-6. They also don't have any injured players we could potentially scoop at a discount outside of maybe Brian Thomas. But even Brian Thomas looks like he's playing this week. This team's 1-7. I would love to go get McCaffrey from this roster. Now, of course, the issue is, okay, 1-7 team. Are they even going to check your message? Have they just completely bounced from the league, which is always a concern. But, I mean, if you could go through and if you could send 2 players that are giving production right now, such as Ramondre Stevenson and Darnell Mooney, pivot over to CMC from the 1-7 squad, I think that would make a lot of sense. Obviously, with that being said, it's much easier said than done. This team that's down here at 2-6, they have the T. Higgins injury. If we could get T. Higgins on the cheap by maybe pivoting off of Darnell Mooney to T. Higgins, I think that could be a very clear play where you give that team the production in the short term. We potentially get the upside in the long term. And then another thing that I would potentially look at with our roster in particular is Tucker Kraft is somebody that I would just prefer selling high if we get the option. Now, obviously, it's not like a super easy call because I don't feel comfortable just rolling with streaming tight ends rest of season. I want a tight end in return. But I mean, if you could find somebody that would be willing to pivot over and maybe give you an option like Evan Ingram, where we can just more so comfortably project out the target share in his respective offense, I think that would be something I'd be interested in. But like I said, I understand with that deal, it is much, much easier said than done. But overall, I mean, it's a great team where we are definitely trying to go through and pick up an injured asset or two at a discount, specifically from one of those teams with a losing record at the moment. Again, much easier said than done. I understand that. I did hook you up with both a free trade question as well as a free start sit question, though. So if you have anything else that you want to send my way about this team, don't hesitate. I'd be super happy to take a look at it. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you. I really hope I was able to help you out in some way with this. In reality, I think you've already set your roster up perfectly for the league settings. I think that if this was a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, it'd make a ridiculous amount of sense for us to go through and for us to potentially make a trade pivoting off of wide receiver depth to get an upgrade inside the starting lineup. But here, it's maybe a little bit tougher. Gatsby coming out with a massive dono. My guy, I appreciate you. Let me also give with both a free trade question and a free start sit question. Gatsby is always out here. Says, saw you have Lamb, wide receiver 1, and Jefferson, wide receiver 3. Not a big difference, but curious your thinking here. I agree with you, but it's the opposite of most of the rankings I see. Lamb, softer schedule, especially in the playoffs. Yeah, I actually put out that video earlier today. I will say that video was recorded like 2 days ago, where we go ahead and we look at all the fantasy football playoff schedules that you have for wide receivers. My thought process here with Lamb in particular is if you go through and if you look at the historical split that you had with, or I don't want to say the historical split, obviously that's not. But if you look at what Lamb did last season before and after the bye, there was a massive difference between the two. Plus, if you were looking at the target competition that you have coming in the form of TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota, there is just a little more competition that you have with the combo of Addison, Hawkinson in Minnesota in comparison to Dallas. I think we are already kind of seeing the Minnesota Vikings offense that was primed to regress, step backwards just a little bit here as well. So for me, I want to be on record. If anybody has Justin Jefferson over Jalen Hurts, I'm not going to fault them for it whatsoever. For me, it's more so a preference. I'm sorry, not Jefferson versus CeeDee Lamb, of course. For me, it's more so just a preference type thing here with Lamb. Jefferson's been the much more consistent wide receiver, though. Like, Jefferson's been very much range bound, where every single game you're getting about 20 fantasy points plus or minus 5. But again, I prefer Lamb. Again, as you mentioned, and as we talked about in the video that came out today, you do have the better playoff schedule too. But I did hook you up with a free start sit question and trade question if you had anything else you want to send me. John coming out with a start sit here. For the flex spot, we're looking at Tracy, Jaden Reed. It is really tough, right? You have Love good to go. It's a great matchup for wide receivers here against Detroit. We know that defenses have a hard time running the ball against the Lions. With that being said, Tyrone Tracy clears concussion protocol, should have a 3-down workload and a better matchup this week than what he had a week ago. And a week ago, he absolutely crushed. Can y'all please spam the chat? Would you rather have Tracy or Reed this week? Are you going to go Tracy or Reed? Please let me know in the live chat. Reed, Tracy. Reed, Tracy. Reed, Tracy, Tracy, Tracy. Reed, Tracy, Tracy. Reed. I just simply don't know, to be honest with you. I think this is probably the right call. Tracy for the floor, Reed for the upside. Obviously, you're going to have a lot more volume with Tracy, but you have the big play potential with Reed. And obviously, this is under the assumption it's a full PPR league. Non-PPR league, you just go ahead and take Tracy. Now, Snub's coming out with our next question. This is going to come down to the tight end position with Kincaid as well as Laporta. Here you actually have the Lions offense projecting out worse than what we typically see weekly, given the tougher matchup against Green Bay. And currently, the Bills project to be the highest scoring offense in the NFL this week. You're going just back and forth, 6 targets, 7 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets for Dalton Kincaid every single week. I am going to take Kincaid over Laporta. Honestly, it's up to you, though. And then going over to the flex, I think at this point you have to have Tyrone Tracy now that he clears. I think you have to take him over Waddle. To be completely honest with you, I'm rolling with Waddle in the Flock League. I'm really hoping that Waddle improves. But we are just going to have to be waiting a little bit here to actually see it, because this is a very tough matchup against Buffalo. Now, Napa Corn coming out with our next question. Going down to the flex, we're looking at Brian Thomas, Josh Downs, Tony Pollard. For me, if Brian Thomas is good to go, I'm going to go ahead. I will take him. Now, obviously, we kind of need that confirmation before you were to make that call. If you wanted to pivot to somebody else, I would go Pollard over Downs at this point with no Spears and Pollard cleared. But obviously, Downs is in a matchup in which the Vikings have allowed a ton of points to opposing wide receivers, and Downs has been great so far this season. Now, Blueberry Calories coming out, says, tough matchup this week. Need big upside plays. Quarterback, I'm going to be going with Love over Kyler. If you are looking at Love, obviously you do have the potential risk of the injury here lingering a bit, but we're going for the upside. We're not necessarily thinking about the floor. Going down to wide receivers, it's JSN, Tillman, or Zay Flowers. If we're going upside, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take JSN, where now you have no DK Metcalf. Flowers, you have the worst matchup you could possibly ask for going up against Denver. This is with the expectation that Deontay Johnson plays this week. And then flex. Actually, I'm sorry. We're going to go Dobbins. I was just about to lock in Tracy. Who else do we have at running back? Brian Robinson is going to play. If you want to go Tracy over Robinson, I wouldn't fault you for it, but if you're chasing the ceiling, it's with Robinson. But definitely go Dobbins here for the flex regardless. Now, Andrew, going over to our next question. Here we are considering in the flex. McMillan, I can't go with McMillan with him being questionable in the Monday night game. Also, it was a tough matchup in the first place. Leggett, Addison, Laporta. Leggett's been cleared. You have no Adam Thielen. For me, I'd probably take Leggett. Addison's had one game with 5 or more targets. Both guys I drafted in a lot of underdog drafts, so. I hope we're looking at, Mason, you told me to start Leggett, and he only scored 20 points. Addison scored 30. Oh, if that happens, your boy will be a happy man. But can you all spam the chat? Who would you start between Leggett, Addison, Laporta? Chris says I would honestly just flex Laporta. Obviously, Sam Laporta is my most drafted tight end. My guy, this looks like, these are all my players. You have my entire team here. Leggett, Laporta. Sam Laporta has been a mid tight end 2. Are we wanting to flex a mid tight end 2 in a bad matchup? Let me go through and pull this up. The game log here with Laporta. We're looking at 6 targets, 2 targets, 1 target, 4 target, 2 targets, 3 targets, 5 targets. I rank Laporta as tight end 1 coming into the season, and I thought he was a great value in round 4. So trust me, if anybody's going to come out here and try to stick up for Sam Laporta, it should be me. But I can't start Sam Laporta in the freaking flex spot. Now, Nader Nostrum, always happy to see you. I'm sorry, I still can't pronounce the name, but Adam Thielen's not going to be playing this week, so I think you go ahead and obviously we have no Brooks, we have no Pacheco, we have no Thielen, we have no Pickens. I think you just lock in Ladd McConkey. I definitely would expect Ladd to potentially regress here a bit. You only had 6 targets last week. Elijah Moore's in the other flex spot. Dear God. I mean, I would rather play Ladd over Elijah Moore for sure. Luke Cage has dropped Caleb, Darnold, Slayton, or DeMarcus. It's either Slayton or DeMarcus. There's both Slayton and DeMarcus. There would be no world in which you would ever put them in your starting lineup. At least now that Puka looks like he's good to go. Like, both wide receivers are like, oh, crap, he scored 20 points this week. He caught a touchdown. It's like, oh, okay, did anybody start him? No. And when you do start him, you very easily could get a 3-point game. So for me, I think neither wide receiver is worth the roster spot. I'd probably drop Slayton because he's in the worst offense. Now, going over to our next question from B. Cosme. Running back, we are looking at Chase Brown as an auto lock with the Zach Moss injury. Don't even have to think about this for a second. If any of y'all have Chase Brown on your bench right now, for the love of God, get him in. Cade Otton, auto lock as well with no Evans, no Godwin. And then going down to the flex, you are most likely just going to go ahead and play Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, he's been an extremely volatile wide receiver so far this season. But I mean, your secondary options here, we're looking at somebody like Chuba Hubbard, who is just in so much of a worse offense. And you also have the Miles Sanders usage as well. Now, B. Cosme says, not completely cooked yet. Can I afford this trade? Chase Brown Harrison to CMC. What do we have? This is a 12-team league where you start 2 receivers in a flex. Running back this week, we'd be starting Jacobs and Hubbard. Wide receiver would be left over with Lamb, Cup, and then literally those would be our only 2 wide receivers. So if you made this trade, you would only be rostering 2 wide receivers. So for me, no, I don't think you can do this. Plus, with Brown, you get the bump because of the Moss injury too. I definitely think you have a lot of upside. I just don't see a world in which we're going to put ourselves in that position. Now, Kutrav coming out says, Waddle, JSN, Reed, Tracy, pick 2 PPR. Thanks. Thank you. Waddle, JSN, Reed, Tracy. I'm going to go with both Reed as well as Tracy. Obviously, both get positive news. You get the positive news with Reed that loves playing. Tracy, that Tracy's playing. I mean, I guess all these guys pretty much get positive news. You get the positive news for Metcalf that you have no, for JSN that you have no Metcalf. But I think Reed's in the better offense. I think you have the guaranteed touches with Tracy. And then with Waddle, typically you see the Dolphins project out to be not an elite offense, but well ahead of average. And this week in particular against the Bills, they are 8.5-point dogs and have a below average implied team total. Now, Des coming out with our next question. This is Start Sit says, Taysom Hill and DeMario on the waiver wire. Is it worth stashing or playing at the flex? So let's see who we would drop. We're going to play Jordan Love. You don't want to drop Darnold. Love has the bye next week. A wide receiver, you could drop Elijah Moore. I would rather have Demario Douglas over Elijah Moore on my roster. So I would drop Elijah Moore. I'd pick up Demario Douglas. I think we play Shakir regardless, though. I'm not playing Douglas, but we'll play Shakir, pick up Douglas, drop Elijah, and then play both running backs with the starting roles with both Chuba and Dowdle, especially now that you get no Ezekiel Elliott in this game as well. And it should be the highest scoring game of the week. At least that's what's currently being projected by sportsbooks. Now, our next question coming out from Westberg says, full BBR 12-team league, who for wide receiver 2 and a flex? So wide receiver 2, I am going to go with Waddle over Hopkins. Obviously, we are hoping that we get a big Hopkins week. We are hoping that he continues to expand his role. You know, Waddle, you are getting over 90% of the routes run there. And then going over to what we have for the flex. If you wanted to go Ridley, I'm not going to fault you. If you also wanted to go with Alexander Madison, I think that would be a fine play. I think, honestly, I may just take Madison here. And that, you know, you have the 3-down usage. You have the usage as a receiver as well. So for me, I'd probably go with Madison in the flex. Now, Manny Binns coming out. Quarterback, we're rolling with Allen, of course. Running back, we have Gibbs and Kyron as auto starts every single week. Wide receiver, we are going to be going with Devonta Smith, and this other slot's not super easy between Waddle and Downs. I know everybody and their mom wants to jam in Downs over Waddle. I'm not smart enough to do it. I'm still going to run with Waddle, the guy that we have seen over the years of wide receiver 2 production. And then we're going to go with Tracy with the guaranteed workload in New York, and what does project to be a better matchup than what the Steelers obviously were. Now, Nick coming out with our next question says, hey, Mason, 6-2, trying to make a playoff push. So Lamb to Tyreek, downgrade. Gibbs to CMC, downgrade. But you get Jordan Mason, and I don't think you do this. Especially if you're trying to push for the playoffs right now. I mean, you already have both the combo of Gibbs and Lamb through their bye. You get a running back 1, wide receiver 1. In Dallas, a respectable offense. In Detroit, the best offense in the league. So I think you're taking on a lot of risk by making this trade. And you're probably not getting compensated enough for that risk. Now, Tin Man says, who do we start here? Playing the top team in my league this week, need upside. Running back, we're going to lock and load Chase Brown. Wide receiver, we are going to be going with Jaden Reed if we are chasing the ceiling. And then down in the flex, for me, it either comes down to Brian Robinson or a receiver if you were going upside. I probably still end up going with Brian Robinson. Obviously, since the hamstring injury, you've seen the amount of snaps that he's played decrease, while at the same time, you're in a situation in which I don't know. You don't have the receiving usage as of late. They add another running back to the active roster today, maybe indicating that we shouldn't expect a massive role for B-Rob. So it's not the easiest thing in the world, but I think I run with it. Let me go ahead and refresh this. I'm going to try refreshing this entire page because we just rolled out something new here that I haven't showed just yet. Is this working? This is working. Perfect. So we actually just rolled out leaderboards. We're also going to get y'all profile pics on the site as well. So we have the leaderboards for the top spenders. We're obviously working through a lot of stuff with the devs on flockfantasy.com. We're just trying to improve the site every single day. So you can see the leaderboard for the top spenders. Here you see the month, week, day. The day, yeah, we need to just, God, this is so damn frustrating. But looks like it works when we refresh it. But if we don't refresh it, it's not doing much. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's dive into this next one. And let me real quick see something to do. I'm sorry. My brain is just broken. We ran 50 miles today again. I am probably going to try to go to sleep, and I will wake up extremely early to answer these. I woke up extremely early this morning. I went out and ran 50 miles. My brain's breaking. I don't think I'm going to be able to give y'all great answers to your questions right now. So even if you got a question in, it's still going to be answered tomorrow morning, and it's going to be sent to you through the site with an exact custom link to the exact time that your question was answered. So even if you're not in the live stream, you're still going to get to see the answer to your question no matter what. I just have a massive headache right now. I feel like if I don't go to bed right this second, I'm not going to be able to wake up in the morning to live stream. So I'm sorry for cutting it off early here, but we're going to, of course, we're going to get to these free team reviews on Underdog ASAP. If you want to get that free team review on Underdog, y'all know how to do it. You can go over to Underdog Fantasy, use promo code FLOCK. You'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you'll get that free Jalen Hurts pick, more than less than half a total yard as well for the game on Sunday nights, and the free team review in the live stream every single day. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address. Teresa says, what time? Usually I start the streams on Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central, so 8 a.m. Eastern. I don't want to guarantee that, though, just because, like I said, I've never run 50 miles before. My body's shutting down, and if I sleep an extra hour, I sleep an extra hour. We may do 8, but I'll be live for, I want to guarantee, at least 4 hours tomorrow morning. But I appreciate y'all, and I hope I get to see you tomorrow morning.